Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum. I am your host Faisal Raza Khan and you are watching Foresight. Viewers, in Pakistan, unfortunately, despite of several policies, legal, institutional and administrative frameworks, violence against children is on rise. In 2023, a non-governmental organization has issued a report of just several months, and in that report, it suggests 4,213 children faced sexual or physical violence. Almost 75% of the cases were reported in the largest province population-wise in Punjab. Internet, mobile, TV, different written and video contents are also spreading abusive and sometimes the explicit content that leads to the violence against children as well. Pakistan has enacted lots of laws, and especially which are very important laws related to the to prevent the child abuse, and those were in recent history the Criminal Law Amendment Act 2016, the Prevention of Child Abuse Act 2018, the Zainab Alert, a Response and Recovery Act 2020, but majority lacks effective implementation and coordination between the relevant agencies. It is very important, very imperative, very vital for at least justice to the victims and also to punish the perpetrators. To talk on this very important segment, very important issue, we have in our studios Advocate Sharafat Ali Chaudhry. Most welcome to you, Advocate Sir. He is the legal expert. We will talk on legal aspects of this important issue. And online joining us, Ms. Mehwish Kayani. She is the child rights activist. Thank you very much, Mehwish, for joining us online. So my first question related to you, Sharafat Sir, that government and civil society along with the legal fraternity, they are extensively working to end all sorts of crime or the violence, abuses against the children particularly. But unfortunately, we have seen that it is continuously on rise. What's the reason behind? What is the root cause?
Thank you very much, sir, for inviting me and having me here on this very important topic. If you allow me to go up a bit, you can say having a bit of background, this child rights agenda and particularly the child protection agenda, this has been, you can say Pakistan has been working as you said, that the government institution, civil society, a lot of institutions been created particularly during last 2 decades. I would take it from a positive perspective that from it starts from where nobody talks about the abuse, nobody talks about the child abuse, and it's here that where now we talk about the numbers.
Yeah,
we categorize them.
Definitely.
This means that voices are coming, voices are being heard, there are institutions, people can talk to them. So having said that, unfortunately, I mean that there should not be even a single number. There should not be even a single child to be abused.
Obviously.
But I mean that what we say, I humbly would may differ from the perspective that it's on rise. I would take it that people are more coming toward complaining. There are more reports. Previously, there might have been a lot of incidents, but there was no culture to highlight those issues.
So do you think that it's kind of a change or a sea change, that at least people are talking about it, people are reporting, people are not afraid of going to the police stations or the helping the prosecution, particularly the cases are into the courts and courts are very vigilant on that. Is it like the situation is like that?
You just referred a few laws right now. If you take about the names, so the criminal law.
Definitely, there are lots of other laws because these are in the recent history.
I mean that the criminal law amendment, Second Amendment Act, that was particularly, I mean, to curb the child sexual abuse. The certain provisions were, fortunately, I was the person who drafted that provision. I was at that time working as a legal advisor within the Ministry of Human Rights. So at 2016, when this law was even being drafted, there were a lot of questions that do we need to have such kind of law? I mean that people were not so open than to having law and now having prosecution, and there has been now a lot of cases, you can say those are being now prosecuted. So if you referred another law, the ICT Child Protection Act 2018, Zenab Alert Act, these are the recent laws. So I will say that that the having legislation is the first step. So right now throughout Pakistan, all the provinces got the child protection legislations. The names are different. For example, in Punjab, the law was of back of 2004, but it has been amended from time to time.
Your point well taken. We'll move on. Mehwish, when we are talking about the criminal offences like children harassment, sexual exploitation and abuse, using them for drug trafficking, terrorism and child smuggling, and overall, what's the situation right now? How do you see that? Because you are working extensively on child matters.
Thank you so much for having me and talking on this very important issue. Definitely, there is rise in the criminal offense against children, and it can be attributed to various factors, including socio-economic disparities, breakdown in family and community structures, then inadequate legal and protective mechanisms. So the children are very, vulnerable, and such as those living in the poverty or lacking the parental supervision, or targeted by the perpetrators seeking to exploit their innocence and vulnerability for criminal gain as well. So once again, as I'll share some stats from the UNODC, that the number of detected child trafficking victims has increased by 5% globally in recent years. And there are, local data as well on this. So yeah, there is rise in the sexual exploitation with children, and then obviously just because of these, perpetrators and all the violations, children are facing mental health problems. They are facing PTSD. They are, victim of violence, corporal punishment, trafficking, and drug abuse is rise as well. It's not only in the, with the people who are in the elite class, but nowadays people who, children especially, who end up in the streets, they are using, different sort of substances for drug and to, calm them mentally. But yeah, they are, vulnerable, and it's a lot of rise in that. And after COVID, we have seen a lot of, huge rise in these cases of exploitation and harassment. And as you have shared the data from the sexual violence and abuse as well, the number has rise significantly, because people used to stay in their home, and children were being, abused by their acquaintances as well. So there is a lot of, a large number of the children who are being
So what about, Mehwish, what about the school-going children? They are experiencing violence sometimes at the hands of their own teachers, sometimes their own colleagues, sometimes their community. What is the ratio right now, whether that is on rise in rural areas or mostly in the urban centers?
Well, it's it's on the rise as well. But yeah, definitely, while violence against school-going children occurs, in both rural and urban settings, we know very well. But the nature and the prevalence vary a lot. In rural areas, there are limited resources and infrastructure, as well as there is a culture norm as well, and it contribute to higher incidence of violence. But including the corporal punishment by teacher and peer bullying, it's in the urban settings as well. But here I will also mention some of the facts from the UNICEF as well, that according to UNICEF, globally approximately 1 in 3 students between the age of 13 to 15 experience bullying. So we can have an idea, like how globally this trend is, too much higher, and children are facing it. And it's not like, some other one is, bullying them, but peer pressure is a lot, and teachers are doing it. And then obviously in the rural areas, there is a trend and culture of, sending children to different religious madrasas for, education and everything, because they are getting they're getting shelter due to poverty, they are getting food and everything. And here as well, again, you see a lot of corporal punishment over there. Although we have a law in Pakistan right now,
Mehwish, your point well taken. Your point well taken. Sharafat sir, is it true that we are still struggling to secure our children digital rights and protect them from any sort of dark web and their web or social media exploitations? Any law that ensures 100% protection of our children?
Well, the law ensures protection. Definitely, we have Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act. There are specific provisions, and even there are provisions in the PPC as well. That and even there are provincial legislations as well. For example, in KP, there's a KP Child Protection Welfare Act 2010 that also has a provision. So, I mean that the legislation now we can say exists, but the important part is that whether that is fully implemented, and second, you talked about the digital rights, whether I mean that we are up to that technological level that you can stop every website. There's been case in Islamabad High Court where this question was before Islamabad, and PTA was asked that whether they can stop all the websites those are objectionable, presenting objectionable material. They have so far, the PTA so far I think blocked hundreds of thousands of websites.
Yes,
but
have.
You know that in 5 minutes you can create a new website. So you cannot stop someone from creating a new website. The recent data
and lots of other alternatives are also available, like VPN and all of the things. So you can access it.
Yeah, Sahil calculated data of last 6 months, and there were 61 cases that has been traced by FIA. So yes, the issue exists, definitely the issue exists, and I think it's more than legislation, it also needs the awareness. I mean that how we tell our, you can say, not only the teachers but to the parents but to the adults as well, that how they can train their children, I mean that how to use these telecommunication and internet safely.
Definitely, you have well elaborated. Mehwish, how much we have enough facilities like medical and healthcare facilities for children who are already in trauma, the victims of mental torture, becomes a child. Do you not think that the lack of those facilities, the children become again having health abuse and all that, he or she suffers a lot really?
Definitely, as you are mentioning, different forms of violence against children, and all of these, have impact on their mental health, and they torture them, whether it's physical abuse or maybe mentally, socially or psychologically, it does have its effects. And the absence of adequate medical and healthcare services for children who endured the mental torture, it just exacerbate their suffering and constitute a grave form of child health abuse. For example, in rural areas where access to mental health professionals is very limited, so children may struggle to receive timely treatment for condition, as I told you, post traumatic trauma stress disorders, or maybe depression, or leading to prolonged suffering and impaired functioning. So a lot of work needs to be done, because it has very negative impact on health of children. And globally, 20% of children and adolescents experience the mental health disorders. And we need to do a lot more, because when I'm just mentioning the 20% globally adolescents experience the health disorders, yet less than 20% receive the appropriate care for that as well. So definitely, if we compare,
what about you are talking about mental health? So what about psychological and social health of those children who are under trauma? So because in most of the times we have seen very closely that their future is compromised to some extent. So how do you see that?
Yeah, definitely. Their future is, definitely compromised, because these children are, they are facing the depression and all those trauma, and just because of that, they cannot have a very healthy relationship in the future. They end up doing, substance uses, drug abuse, end up with alcohol and different sort of things like that. So definitely, we are, just ruining our second leadership and next generation as well, because someone, the future is in the hand of children as well. And when they are ending up with the mental health issues, and ending up with substance uses, and just wasting their time. They cannot study very well as well. So definitely it will hinder in the development of the country and for their personal development and overall vision as well.
So, do you think, Mehwish, that child protection bureaus, like child protection and welfare bureaus, are working efficiently and they are catering all those destituted children, especially to make them skillful and have the mental health treatment psychologically? Those children must have to be very satisfied for their future particularly. Do you think that they are effective, the most effective organizations right now?
Yeah, definitely. At least someone is doing something. So while Child Protection and Welfare Bureau play a crucial role in safeguarding the right of vulnerable children, there are challenges as well in ensuring their effectiveness and efficiency, particularly in addressing the needs of destitute children, as you have mentioned, because obviously they do have limited resources. We know the situation of our country. Then obviously we do have bureaucratic hurdles, a long wait for the processes and signatures and everything and orders, and then there is a gap in the coordination between government agencies and civil society organizations, and it can also hinder the delivery of comprehensive services for those children who are in that state. And approximately, I will share once again, 1 in the 6 children worldwide live in the extreme poverty, lacking the basic access to necessities such as food, shelter, and education. So once again, I'll say we are, a third world country. We know very well our situation. So I'll just say it's just a drop in the ocean. We need to do a lot more. The Bureau need to do a lot more, because except that, the Bureau, we do have NCRC, National Commission on the Right of Child, in the, federal level, in the national level as well.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah,
Definitely.
all those commissions, although, departments are doing very well, civil society is playing their role. And once again, I'll say that, it's not the responsibility just of the government or just on the civil society, but we all
Whole
are.
of the nation approach is needed. You are absolutely right. Whole of the nation approach is needed. Every bit of entity, every organization, civil society, media, everyone has to play their role. When we are talking about Sharafat, as Mehwish rightly mentioned about the National Commission of the Rights of the Child, and you were the very important and pivot personality when we are talking about that commission, enactment of that commission particularly. So then, of course, we have in provinces, as we have just talked about, child protection and welfare bureaus. So whether the adequate legal provisions and assistance is provided to those children, to their families, or we are still lagging behind? And what about bureaus and commission? They are working efficiently in that legal perspective?
Well, the answer may not be as much straightforward. If you ask me, for example, if we ask that whether the objective of creating those institutions been achieved, the answer may be no. Whether we are going toward the right direction, the answer may be yes. I mean that for, as you mentioned, just
objectives, definitely it takes time, but I think so the direction is very important.
Yeah, as you mentioned that the this Commission on the Rights of the Child, that was created under the Commission on the Rights of the Child Act 2017. So commission was formed in 2018, and this commission, only the first tenure of this commission was completed, and recently the new commission was constituted. So I would say that during if you look at from another perspective, from the inside, that what was the capacity of the commission, even the commission's member till the end of their tenure been struggling to get their own salaries. Most of the you can say activities were run through the consultants, those were funded or supported by multilateral or bilateral organizations or other civil society organizations. So I mean that when we create an institutions that definitely require the manpower, that require the other financial resources as well.
Things,
so there are,
things,
yeah, so there are other issues as well. But I think that keeping in view the limitation of resources, these institutions are start working, and I think those are at least the right directions. If you go, for example, 15 years before, there was before 2010, there was no such institutions, but now every province got its own names may be different, it may be child
means
protection.
that at least this very imperative issue is streamlined and we
Yeah,
have some objectives and we
exactly.
are going in the right direction.
Yeah, there are provincial
that's good at
institutions,
least.
and then there is a federal commission that can see overall, and definitely but there's a need to do a lot.
Definitely, your point well taken. Mehwish, do you think that it's vital and necessary to have life skills embedded in our curricula, particularly to protect our children from any sort of violence, or if anything happens, then at least families and children are able to cater this, and they have to seek assistance from the relevant quarters?
Yes, definitely. It's a, a dire need, strongly need for doing this, embedding the life skills in our curricula, and it's very essential for equipping the children with the knowledge, attitude, and those skills needed to protect themselves from various forms of exploitation. Because all of the time, I or you can't be with the children every time. That's why we need to equip them with those skills and knowledge as well, because life skills education provides children with the essential tools for navigating those challenges, making informed decisions, and building resilience in the face of adversity as well. So we have seen, in the countries where comprehensive sexuality education is integrated into schools and curricula, so adolescents are more likely to, delay the sexual activity and, exploitation and different forms of that as well. So it's much more necessary, because we need to, teach our children, so they should be equipped with those skills, and they can, better protect themselves. We have different, sessions with age appropriate groups, because it's not like that we are, just teaching them which is not, age appropriate or which should be shameful, but it should be taught to them. And we have different sessions with children of 2 or 3 years. We tell them that, okay, these are your private parts and nobody can touch it except the doctor, or maybe in the supervision of parents, someone like that. So it's very much necessary. I on from this platform, once again I put emphasis on that thing, that we need to put it in the curriculums, and we need to teach.
Any work is going on regarding the curricula? If you just briefly tell us about that.
Sorry,
Any work is going on?
Yeah, the work has been done. You have, recently listened about the previous government, that they have incorporated some sort of, curriculum, and there is a different name for that. In globally we use the comprehensive sexuality education, but in Pakistan we call it life skills based education, and it has been incorporated, and teachers are doing it, and civil society is having different sort of sessions and making different children groups and teaching them, and it does have a impact on this as well. So yeah, it's just fostering empowerment and self-confidence in those children as well.
That's good. That's absolutely great. Very encouraging, really. Thank you very much, Mehwish Kayani, for being with us online and for your precious time. Thank you very much. Well elaborated. Thank you. So nice of you. Sharafat, do you think that existing legislations are not working properly to prevent the child abuse, or we need new legislations, or the institutional mechanism are not up to the mark to implement all those legislations? What's the case basically?
Well, I think as earlier we discussed that during the last 10-15 years, Pakistan made progress in making a pro-child legislation, particularly the legislation related to child protection. But that there are principal legislation, and then there is a delegated legislation.
Obviously.
That the parliament made certain acts, but then there are, you can say there may be a gap, for example, to enforce those laws properly, to make their rules and make their regulations. The delegated legislation in certain areas that still need to be, for example, enacted. For example, the rules for the Juvenile Justice System Act has not been enacted in all the provinces. Same like the case of maybe some of the other laws. But the important thing is that the institutions created through those legislations need to be supported. Supported with the financial resource, supported with the human resource. Their capacity needs to be built as per requirement, what law requires. So it's not only, I mean, that unless you create a complete mechanism to enforce that legislation, the legislation will only not you can say complete the result. So I would say that yes, we do have legislation that can be improved, particularly in relation to child protection. Definitely there is one area related to children, that's the child labor, that I think we need to improve legislation in those areas. But more importantly than enacting new legislation, it's important that we have the delegated legislation, we have the rules to enforce the principal acts, and we you can say support our institutions, build their capacities.
Definitely, your point well taken. Viewers, here we welcome Ms. Valerie Khan. She is the child rights expert. Most welcome to you, Valerie Khan, for your precious time. My first question is related to that. Is it correct that today's world is actually the child can be a witness to the violence, or a victim of violence, or perpetrator of the violence? So at home, through the community, or might be through any kind of medium or media?
Yes, indeed. From a legal jargon, as per international standards, we refer to children in contact, victim or witness, or in conflict with the law, children who are accused or who have been convicted or under trial for a crime. And the setup at which it can happen is certainly not limited to, I would say, the public sphere. It can also happen at home. In confined environment, it can be the case in what we call closed settings, which means in institutions, in schools, in boarding schools, in some sports association, and it can also happen online indeed. And with the development of new technologies, this is definitely something we need to look into.
So, Ma'am Valerie, when we are talking about today's gadgets, like you have the computers, you have the television, you have mobile phones available, particularly the Android and all others. Sometimes you have music, the noise pollution, etc. So these sorts of non-traditional gadgets of violence, do you think that they are contributing against children?
I would be nuanced here. I mean, violence against children is not a new phenomenon, and fortunately it has always existed. It was more or less reported, but it is certainly true that when you refer to new technologies, on one hand, it does provide opportunities for children learning, for their outreach.
Obviously.
It's a way to, for example, foster access to education, you see. However, on the other hand, and we need to be mindful of that, it also exacerbates danger. So I would refer to, very recently, the Pakistan Telecommunication Authority joined hands with the National Commission on the Rights of the Child and with a private communication company to develop handbooks for parental guidance on how to protect children who, online. And I think online safety, online child protection is certainly as important as offline child protection. And we need to collaborate with state institutions and the various state actors to ensure that there is a focus on prevention and adequate response. And that means, again, child's empowerment and awareness, but also strengthening parental awareness and capacities to support and monitor the child, and also sharing where to report cases of concerns of abuse whenever parents or children identify any risk, any danger.
So some of the experts or the religious scholars, they always insist upon that a child, to educate them, to have the learning process on, there must have to be some sort of punishment must have to be there. So when we are talking about punishment, there must have to be a very thin line between punishment and violence. So how do you see that, whether what is happening in the educational institutions or the religious institutions, that is kind of a violence or just a punishment?
Well, I mean, you see, I don't like the word punishment really. Although I've been a mother, I have made mistakes as well, for sure. But I think what is important is that in light of the newly acquired knowledge,
Or to correct mistakes, but if we just fare enough on that particular note.
yeah, I think the key answer is lies in what we call positive disciplining. Children require guidance. It's the guardian's responsibility to teach children what to do, what not to do. I think the golden rule is that first, as guardians, we cannot ask children not to break the rules or the laws if we do it ourselves. We need to be aware of our duty to be a role model, number one. We need to practice what we preach. Because children learn through looking at us. That's a very important element to remember. And secondly, we need to talk about positive disciplining, which means that rather than a retributive approach, we need to focus on a reformative approach. Talk to the child and get the child to realize why a mistake has been committed, why something serious may have happened because of his or her action, and then make the child realize what was wrong and also take responsibility for it and decide jointly to be amended. Because it's not that you just talk, there needs a notion of amendment, what should we call that? Making amends for what was wrong. And I think it's a far more pedagogical and effective way to ensure positive citizenry and healthy adults later on. Violence
Well elaborated, well elaborated. Sharafat, when we are talking about the child labor, a huge factor behind violence against children, child abuse and all that, it's prohibited by law. While we have lots of flaws in the system as well, in implementation, the policing system particularly. So do you think that we need to bridge all these gaps, but also to take action against all those perpetrators who are actually doing it? And when police is going to act, hires must have to think about not to agree to settle such cases.
Well, as far as the matter of child labor is concerned, that's totally different from involving the policing. In case of child labor, I would say that we still need to improve our legislation in all different provinces. I mean that a child can work from 12, for example, in KP, it's the minimum age it starts from 12, and even in some provinces, I mean that it's up to the 16. But still, if you come toward the child's definition under the international law and under other several child protection domestic legislations, a child is every person who is below the age of 18 years. So I mean that involving a 13, 14 years, 15 years child into the labor, that would definitely end up with child exploitation. So we need to definitely on one hand improve legislation in this perspective as well, but on the other hand, when for example there is some offense committed, definitely there should be a proper investigation, there should be a proper prosecution, and the culprits needs to be you can say booked and they should be brought to the justice. Definitely there should not be any out of court settlements. It should be, I mean, if someone has done wrong, that should face the music and that should face the justice.
Definitely it is, very rightly said. Ms. Valerie, do you think that economic disparities, unemployment, poverty, illiteracy, conflicts are the main reasons behind the rise of child labor, and as a result the domestic violence or the abuse is also on rise on that particular note, that because of the child labor increases?
Well, actually, socio-economic inequalities are definitely the main reason behind child labor, that's for sure. A lack of of law enforcement as well. For example, the minimum wage is absolutely not being enforced, and the employers who do not enforce that minimum wage are not being held accountable in front of the law. That's a major issue. It's, illegal child labor happens in front of your eyes when we are in Pakistan, and that's something that the authorities responsible to enforce the law must take action for, in addition to promoting and ensuring socioeconomic empowerment of the most vulnerable. But that does require an economic shift, a huge governance programming. I know that this is something that, again, the National Commission on the Rights of the Child and the provincial authorities for children and the Federal Ministry of Human Rights are working on in collaboration with civil society organizations, and hopefully there will be a program on that. But also, I think there is also a mindset issue and intergenerational practices as well. You see where for decades, for several generations, parents have very often, parents of child laborers have been child laborers themselves, children involved into labor themselves. And so to break that cycle of exploitation, there is certainly a need for a fairer socioeconomic model, but also engagement and awareness and family support, and more importantly, accountability of the employers. It's really essential. We have an exploitative mindset, and that needs to be addressed and changed.
But obviously, we can't bifurcate children from other children, because children are children. And but we have seen over the years that most of the poor and underprivileged children are actually involved in the child labor because of the stress, anxiety which is existing in those segments of society. And then they are the most vulnerable to such kind of extreme forms of violence or abuse. So how do you see that, how it can be prevented? Because that is very important, to prevent it, rather act afterwards.
So I think apart from legislative improvement that are currently being advocated for, again, by the state institutions mandated to protect children's rights in Pakistan, one example, but that is not the only one example would be to, for example, criminalize the fact of employing children in domestic labor under 16 years of age. And whenever, between 16 to 18, ensuring that this is done only for a few hours a day and within very stringent labor conditions and decent conditions. But apart from that, again, you need to increase. I'm not saying that only. I'm referring to, any economist who is saying that you need more taxpayers in this country. Who will be able to, give resources to the country so that further, resources can be better distributed to the population. We urgently need a family planning program. We have a ticking bomb, and again, many Pakistani politicians and state actors are saying it. Our population is growing in a manner that is uncontrollable, and that is not sustainable. And then we certainly need to have policies that ensure and monitoring their enforcement that ensure a fair distribution of resources. And when I'm saying that, I think it's very important that we understand that we cannot only focus on charity, because we love to make an indecent show of charity. We really need to focus on economic empowerment, and especially youth economic empowerment. And that needs to be done through improving the quality of education, access to education, and working on mindset and enforcement of minimum wage for youth. And Pakistan is a country with brilliant, very hardworking youth. It's just a matter of political will and relevant policy and synergies.
You're quite well taken. Sharafat, is it true that despite of Pakistan's ratification of the Hague Convention of the Child Abduction in 2016, we don't have much implementing mechanism available in the center? And that's why most of the parents abroad, particularly, they are suffering. Either one or some of the relatives are actually abducting their child and bringing them to Pakistan, and then there are no mechanism. They have to knock every door. So do you think that there must have to be some sort of mechanism at center?
Well, thank you very much for bringing this very important issue. Actually, as far as this Hague Convention requires, it requires to be established a central authority. So, the Solicitor General's office within the Ministry of Law and Justice has been designated as the central authority under the Hague Convention. But the problem is that the Hague Convention has been signed, I think, roughly around 50 countries. Only 50 countries, and most of the countries, they are the European countries. Secondly, the Hague Convention in itself requires that it can apply only when both of the states has been signed. I had a case in which it was a very complex case. A child was born in Hyderabad, but the couple, they got married here, but one was Turkish and father was Turkish, but the mother was of Japanese originally. From his father was Pakistani, but she was Japanese. So, a child is here, 3 countries are involved. When we tried, the mother took a child to Japan. Okay. So, when we tried to, you can say, involve these provisions of the Hague Convention, we came to know that neither Turkey has signed nor
they are not the signatories of that convention.
So Pakistan couldn't do anything. So the problem is that lies within the Hague Convention, that it's been not ratified, and definitely it's a huge issue. For example, the parental abduction that we usually do not call is abduction, but we had certain cases even when a father took a child of 2 months from a mother and just flew away to UK. And
definitely it's a grave issue, really. It needs a lot of debate on that, and particularly the implementation as well. So how much dangerous consequences we have when violence becomes normal in a society, and it's like incidents of mob violence or vigilantism or something like that. So sometimes it happens that society is used to it, and they call it, it happens quite a long time. So do you think that this is not going to be good, particularly in case of child protection and all of others, because that ultimately affect them?
You know that when we say that courtesy begets courtesy, violence begets violence.
Obviously.
When a child experience violence, studies show that when they become a grown-up person, they also, you can say, resort to the same, you can say, of committing violence. So definitely it got a huge repercussions, and for this, it's not only the legislation that require, you can say, the mass awareness at a mass level requires, because this is linked with the peace building, establishing peace and harmony within the society. It requires a lot of efforts by the all quarters. I mean that, for example, if something has happened, the case should be properly investigated and prosecuted and adjudicated. All these institutions are involved. Absolutely. At the same time, media should be involved for creating awareness among the public. For example, if something happens, institutions are there and people should resort to those institutions. At the same time,
one last question that is very important again, that do you not think that all of the stakeholders, including media, and there must have to be some sort of a website or app to have an accumulated data of related to the child protection first, and then some sort of abuse if happened, and what about the prosecution, about the education, and particularly the course of law, and subsequently the actions taken to protect those children? Do you think so that it is important?
Well, it's very much important to have reliable data. Unfortunately, when Pakistan was submitting its report on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, State Party report to UN in 2016, we didn't have a data. There was around 52 questions related to data, and we couldn't answer those. Consequently, when this Child Commission was established, under the law, among their mandate, it's now written that there should be a centralized database related to the child rights, their enforcement, about the violations. So, I mean, ideally there should be a centralized database related to child protection, and the Commission on the Rights of the Child is the proper institution where that should be hosted, and definitely all the relevant institutions may be collaborated with that. Only then you can say know the exact picture, and I mean that how to look into the way forward.
Thank you very much, Sharafat Ali Chaudhry Sahab. Thank you very much for your presence here in the studios. Thank you very much, Ma'am Valerie Khan. Thank you very much for your precious time to be online and elaborated things very well. Thank you very much for your candid views as well. Viewers, as you have just listened to our panelists, that it is very much clear that our children are actually our future, and we have to protect our future from all odds. And for that particular matter, it's important that we have to not only enact the laws, but also to implement all those laws and empower all those institutions with financial, administrative, managerial and all other aspects to protect our future. It is important that the policing system must have to be effective, the prosecution must have to be strengthened, and along with that the judicial system must have to be very robust to deal with such cases of very sensitive nature, but a very imperative aspect. This is today's Foresight. It's time to sign off. Allah Hafiz.